Yeah, this is a talk about sharing. My name is Sarah Saltrick Meyer. I'm a front-end engineer at a company called BuzzFeed in New York. It's a pretty boss job, one of the better ones that I've ever had, and believe me, I've had some jobs in my time. So this is a talk about what happens when we want to share. And what are we talking about sharing here? We're talking about sharing front-end code. Okay, well, why? What, like copy paste isn't good enough for you? Well, here are some reasons why you might want to share code, specifically front-end code with people outside. You might serve developers outside of your organization. Maybe you are like a vendor of analytics software. You want to package it so that other people can use it easily. Perhaps you develop many front-end applications, potentially for clients, and you want to be able to reuse stuff that worked well before. Maybe you only work on, you work for yourselves, sort of, you're one unitary company, but your front end consists of multiple applications and you want a unified look and feel. Maybe you just want your front end code to be more reusable. Maybe all that you want is to do this for yourself, but you've hurt yourself too many times by having something that you didn't integrate well the next time. So our use case at BuzzFeed specifically consists of that front end with multiple applications wanting a unified look and feel. The solution to all these problems may be a component library. Now, what is a component library? Yeah. So a component library, it is a, we talk about web components. This isn't necessarily that. Web components have a specific specification. But a component library, I would say, is anything that is packages of front-end code, probably including templating, probably including styles, and probably including JavaScript that you want to be reused and included together. So this quote, it can be a collaboration tool that bridges the gap between design and development, breaks down the user experience into parts, rather than every single time the designer has to come up with a new page, he has to start again and come up with the design from the outside in or the inside out without having any previously used elements to use again. So let me tell you a little bit about how front-end development works at BuzzFeed. We were once a monolith. Everything from our CMS to our tracking apps to certainly BuzzFeed.com ran on one huge web app. And we still call it web app. It is dead but not gone, I would say. It still molders like a zombie. Like, for instance, the CMS is still on it in the year of our Lord 2017. There are some 700-line Perl switch statements doing templating back in there. And certainly nobody wants to touch that anymore, but some people have to. Fortunately, not me very frequently. Lucky me. So what we've moved away from that. We moved, and we now have a container-based development and deployment environment on microservices. We also, though, have something that's come as part of this is a kind of a balkanization of our front end. Our front end is no longer served by a single application. It is served by multiple applications. Somebody called it a micro front end to me yesterday, or maybe the day before, and I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Here's one thing that we also have, though, that is really nice. We have a really great style guide. Now, what is the difference, maybe, between a component library and a style guide? I can tell you, at least what the difference is at BuzzFeed. That style guide is CSS. That style guide is a set of atomic CSS classes, atomic meaning that you generally have one rule corresponding to one class and vice versa. And so it's not like we had no experience in kind of developing shared code. I actually recommend that you check out Solid if you are interested in style libraries at all. It's been a pretty successful one for us. It despite many attempts to, I think it was our second attempt at getting a style guide together, this one stuck. So we now have 472 services in our front end. And that was a pretty easy count for me to make because we also have that mono repo, one GitHub repo in which all of our services live. So not all of those, by any means, are front-end applications, and it's padded somewhat by the fact that all of our like auth proxies are also separate applications. But like, gosh, that is a heckin' lot of applications, ain't it? We do have one very good containerization solution. Please Google Deploy with Haste, the Story of Rig by my excellent coworker, Matt Reeferson, also known as Snakes. It is a great intro into how we set up like a kind of ECS and Docker and Python-based deployment and delivery solution, which has provided for us like a baseline that makes everything that I'm going to talk about in this talk actually possible. So this is BuzzFeed.com. But let's actually go to BuzzFeed.com for a moment. Oh my God, it's in German. Yeah, nice. Okay. All right, so we see some... Oh, I don't read German, so if there's anything funny... Yep, I bet there's something funny. Okay. Anyway... Damn, I really don't read German. I have no idea. Somebody explain it to me later. Please, leave me in suspense. So when I actually click on this article... Okay, this is the one you're laughing at, isn't it? Okay. Cool. So you actually just crossed a line from one application to another. But we don't want our users to know that. Now, why do we have our front end split up into different applications? Well, even though you might not be able to tell, this one that makes like kind of lists of articles has way fewer requirements in terms of interactivity than the actual post page. So we can like actually cut down on the library size that we're using on these pages compared to these. Should I choose a different article to look at or something? Are you guys all gonna? Okay. Sure. Oh, that doesn't look so bad. Unless it's all out of a can, maybe? I don't know. Anyway, you might notice that we have some stuff in this sidebar here that looks kind of like some stuff we have in the sidebar here. Maybe not exactly the same, but that's certainly... You see this like infinite scrolling behavior? My God, you only want to write that once, right? Never write infinite scrolling more than once. Never, in fact, probably even take it from a library, but do not reinvent that silly wheel. Okay, we're going back to the slides. I'm very sorry. They're probably not going to be as funny as the productions of the people who get paid to make things funny. I love our writers. They're very cute and smart. Anyway, so we have those two different applications. We got bpager and feedpager, and we got other applications that serve different front-end sites. Copy-paste was not working. Though that was the kind of the genesis of like those applications being started up, people really were just copying and pasting things left and right. That post application came first for the single article, and the people who worked on the like list application were just pulling code out in the way that, you know, we all do. How do we like actually code? We copy and paste. It's not a dirty secret because it's great. This wasn't sustainable though, right? It's not like if there's a bug in that infinite scrolling behavior, we don't want to fix it in both places. We want to fix it once. So we had this desperate need for sharing code with each other. Even within our company, this was getting to be quite difficult. And our company isn't that big. We got like maybe 100 developers maximum. Not that many of them are front end either. So then there was a plan. Ian. This guy is great. He used to work at Lonely Planet, where he made, according to his own account, 3 separate attempts at starting a component library. To quote Ian, the first time the tech wasn't really there. This is probably like 2010, 11, something like that, back in the mists of time. And like sharing front-end code really wasn't that easy back then. The second time, it like worked, but it kind of moldered. And we're going to talk about how to prevent things like this from just dying the slow death of code that nobody actually needs. But the third time was the charm. And so he actually did a talk on this. I am going to leave this slide up for a second so that you can like imprint it on your minds and go watch it later because it's very good stuff. And he's a very smart guy. And so when he came to BuzzFeed, he was able to start working on a components library for us. Because we had actually tried to do this at BuzzFeed before. It was called Waffle. It didn't work. Why didn't it work? First of all, because we didn't actually need it. Until we had that like splitting up of the front end, in a monolithic web app, it's actually quite easy to manage that code sharing. You can handle the templating just through imports. You can styles are shareable almost by default, almost a little bit too shareable by default, right? And so while they were definitely, you can tell that by the fact that people made the attempt to have a component library, that they were feeling this need to have things be more easily packaged and reused. Dare I say componentized? It was not a solution whose time had not yet come. So even the best technology in the world, if it's not right for the moment, it will be useless. Perhaps even a little bit worse than useless because you spent all that time doing it instead of solving a different problem. So we called this Buzz Blocks. That is the name of our component library because we're BuzzFeed, and they're like little blocks of BuzzFeed that we put together to make a beautiful block castle. So this is like what you would actually see if you looked inside the BuzzBlocks directory in that big mono repo of ours. It actually lives in a happy little like packages/front-end directory, because one of the great things that's happened since we started doing this is that this is a pattern of packaging code that we've been able to reuse a little bit. Anyway, so it's got components. Get back to that later. Docs, extremely important. Fonts, you can inherently understand why we would want to share those. Images, it's kind of small. JS. This is a huge library for us. It's got a lot of stuff in it, and it's very important because these are a lot of the JavaScript utilities that we use across the site. Not all of them certainly are suitable for sharing, and we do try to keep to the principle that probably not the first time that you reuse something do you want to actually make it a shared thing, maybe the second, because that's when you really know that it wasn't just a one-hit wonder or even a two-hit wonder. That's a real star. And then we have some shared Sass, although that is actually also quite minimal because of that beautiful style guide that I mentioned earlier, which seriously cuts down on the amount of Sass that average developers have to write. And also means that we can have very high standards for the Sass that we do write, because really nobody has to do that much of it. Nobody has to do anything that's that crazy. The only last one I want to talk about is snippets, which are basically inline, those are our inline scripts. JavaScript files for stuff like lazy loading or polyfills that are probably not going to get changed very frequently, but that also we don't want to have in separate places where you can have divergence. Okay, how do we define a component? So when you do this for yourselves, if you do this for yourselves, I'm not going to tell you to, but if this gives you ideas, then here are some ideas. Define them for yourselves, but this is how we do it. So we have a component definition. We have a JavaScript file, a server-side template, a client-side template, a Sass file, and the thing I forgot to put on here is a unit test. I think I must have assumed that was part of the JavaScript file. Unit test is very important. Nothing gets into the component directory without a unit test of some sort, no matter how, honestly, let's face it, minimal. All right, a component definition. This is the true, this is the source of truth for each of these files. This is where the magic and the wonder comes from. So every single component should have a title. It should have a summary of what it's supposed to do. Oh, and very importantly, that title should have nothing to do with its visual presentation. Visual presentation is often one of the most brittle aspects of a piece of code. Nothing changes faster than the colors, than the borders. So don't call something pink box. Call it CTA, maybe. And we also want to describe an API for this, which is basically going to be the types of fields that the component expects to work properly. Now, then we also have a server-side template. We're in, this is actually the JavaScript rendering for the client-side templates. As you can see, some template data is getting passed in there. And then this is a server-side template. We use Jinja for these, so that's a pretty good Python templating library. And again, these modules, if you have imported the specific component, then using one in your application is as simple as putting in one of these script tags. So I really recommend that whatever you do, because notice I'm not talking about a stack here. I'm not talking about the specific technical decisions that you make. I'm talking about a process of structuring this so that it's easy for people to use. And ease of use will be the determination of whether your component library is any sort of success at all. And here we have what it would look like inside, because we want to support both server-side and client-side templating for different use cases, right? Some things should load on the server. Some things should not load on the server because we don't want to cache them. And caching for us is very important, and because otherwise we would get overwhelmed with server costs. We would literally die. The why of a component library is also the how. So whatever the architecture of your site is, you want to play nicely with that to get your component library running. However you're importing front-end code currently, even if you're doing something like symlinks within your project, even if you're working off master, like in a monorepo, work within that system to get as much done as possible. Anyway, so now I'm going to introduce you to another one of my friends. This is Jack. He's one of the infrastructure engineers at BuzzFeed. Now, you hear infrastructure, perhaps you think that Jack works on back-end stuff. Jack is a front-end infrastructure engineer, and he has a lot of the responsibility for making this BuzzBox thing a success. Now, why do we have a front-end infrastructure team? Because we have so many applications that we're trying to build all the time, so many developers that we're trying to support, that we actually have internal teams that just work on making products and tooling for other front-end developers. I think it's pretty cool. Jack is really great. He and this really cool guy named RTM, whose Twitter I don't have. I'm going to try to figure that out by the next time I give this talk. Did a lot of the heavy lifting on BuzzBlocks, making it a usable platform. It was RTM specifically who coded up the gallery. I can't show you the gallery because it only works on a BuzzFeed IP address, which is somewhat annoying, but also somewhat secure. And so the gallery basically iterates through the list of all the components, and if they have valid component.yamls, it spins them up in a gallery format, kind of like a storybook. And so this has been more useful to us than tests by a good measure in terms of making sure that these components don't break. Because you can, as a developer, just have that component library running in the gallery, and you can easily tell if you've broken your stuff or somebody else's stuff. And that part of that component.yaml that I showed you earlier will be an example data, a definition of example data that is used to build up the gallery. So you need a gallery. You also need documentation. You need it very badly, because Jack gets bombarded with questions all day, every day, about why something doesn't work, how did somebody do something, like why is my developer process broken? I need to put something that was on bpager in feedpager. My PM is breathing down my neck. Help me, Jack. You're my only hope. So Jack has done a lot of documentation. There is a README. There is a contributing guide. There is a usage guide. Now, what's the difference between the contributing and the usage guides? Contributing is basically for building BuzzBlocks yourself. Usage is all about how to import them into your project and make them easy. We also have a guide specifically on naming, because when you're in a project that is being used by, literally dozens of people, names actually are one of the hardest and most important things. I can't tell you how many of the things that we have are named some combination of buzz and feed and like page and block and card. It's just like word soup with those four. How many combinations can we get out of them? Not that many. Not that many. It depends on whether you count order. The combinatorics are not good. So we literally have a guide that has a lot of examples about the right and wrong of naming things. And all of this is to make it as easy as possible for people to get involved in the project. So I also want to show you something real quick. This is how we run applications locally at BuzzFeed. That really cool development and deployment environment that I mentioned is called Rig. We spin up applications pretty simply like this. But you see this local FE modules equals true? That's setting a configuration variable for the application, telling it to, instead of looking for the packaged and bundled version of this BuzzBlock stuff, to instead look in your local file system. So this makes it easy for developers to develop BuzzBlocks in place. So rather than like first developing it in that gallery without its context, you can develop it in context and then publish out that version. These are the essential things. Also, the no limit resources is because Webpack really, really hates what we do to it, desperately. So this is something that a lot of people at BuzzFeed have started using. They've started using it not because they think that sharing code is such a cool concept, but out of necessity. Out of that little combination of laziness and desperation that drives all developers to do great things. So how do you make sure that people have the code that they expect and nothing else? Well, Semver. Do you all love Semver? I love Semver. No? Oh, all right. So this has actually been one of the least intuitive things for people to learn while they're doing BuzzBlocks, because we actually have people kind of manually manage these versions. And for the average feature developer who is not very used to like contributing to a library, this is not like the mentality. So people are always forgetting to update the changelog. Oh, there's a changelog. It's like 2,200 lines long. It's good. It's a sign of success. And so we have major version bumps. We have features, patches, no change. Go read an article on Semver because I'm not an expert on it, as I prove often when I contribute to BuzzBlocks. We love NPM. As I mentioned, there are other ways that you could potentially do this, but we have found that an NPM package offers just the most flexibility, the most fun in terms of like sharing this stuff with other people. NPM, like, it makes rollbacks extremely simple from the perspective of an application. Just go back to the version that works. It also means that we can do things like test packages. So it didn't used to work this way. It took us a while to get here because of the unstinting efforts of that front-end infrastructure team. But we right now have a webhook that publishes every commit that touches the BuzzBlocks directory as a test package in NPM. And the master versions, where the build should already pass, those always get published as like a canonical version of BuzzBlocks. It just makes it really easy to use as a developer, who doesn't necessarily want to go into the innards of it all the time, but just wants, and also doesn't want to have that exposure from potentially somebody else messed up this component that I use because they didn't understand how I use it, and now my poor application is dead. So that brings me to the trust budget. Which is another phrase that I stole from Ian. While working as a feature developer at BuzzFeed, have had many days when I cursed front-end infra because they had broken something and now I couldn't run Webpack for all of 20 minutes. Developers, I feel like, sometimes are even more sensitive to problems with their workflow than they are to problems with their products. If you remember the LeftPad debacle, when like the internet was broken because developers couldn't do npm install for a while. LeftPad? Anybody? Yeah, all right. So this is kind of like that, but on a much, much, much smaller and more intimate scale. And believe me, getting yelled at doesn't feel more fun because it's fewer people yelling at you if you know them personally. It feels quite bad. So how do we actually set up guardrails so that people don't get in trouble? Well, versioning is one thing, and it's a very important one. But we also require unit tests. We didn't used to require unit tests to put a component in. We learned that lesson. Oh, did we learn it? Markup, we do snapshot testing. I don't care how you do snapshot testing. Just do some snapshot testing. It's good. It really, again, will at least prevent you from breaking something that you don't want to break. And we've also started to do visual regression. For our styles. This used to be really crappy when we did it in Phantom. Now it's a little bit better in Headless Chrome. Obviously, I think of visual regression as being one of the flakiest things that you can possibly do in a build environment, but we're getting there. And one thing that we've also started doing is we do visual regression on elements, not on pages, which is much less brittle. And the Slack channel is one of the most important parts of the project because the Slack channel provides a direct line to the developers, between the developers who use BuzzBlocks, the developers who contribute to BuzzBlocks, and the developers who kind of maintain BuzzBlocks, which are three different groups, even if those people sometimes somebody's wearing all three of those hats. It is essential that people be able to easily access anyone that they need to without doing a git blame. Git blame can be quite misleading. You need a way for people to direct questions not to somebody specifically, but to a knowledgeable group. You can also do like whatever you use. Like you can have those @ groups too. So developers need to know where the code they're changing is being used. If I have a component, my designer has told me, okay, I want a new visual treatment for this component. All right, I go off and I make those changes. My changes break somebody else's use of that component. So I don't feel like we've actually solved this problem yet beyond like really encouraging people to grep for the import. Remember when I showed you we have those like little script tags with like a snippet? I'm always looking for those when I'm doing this to see where stuff is being used. But like obviously gallery implementations of a component are not necessarily a perfect mirror of how things are being used in production. So a combination of having your gallery be in line with what your production looks like and just sort of trying to be sensitive about it, we'll figure it out. There are no really hard technical problems related to this. There are only hard people problems. So the success of a project like this can be measured by developer buy-in. A year ago, there were no buzz blocks. Now there are around 35 different components in the directory. So many actually that like the infrastructure team responsible for this is actually trying to audit them and take a step back and say which of these can be combined, which of these are not up to our coding standards, which we have actually been continuously raising. And the more we've raised them, kind of the more we've realized like the weaknesses of earlier approaches. So I would say it's been an unqualified success, but it's been a success because it had to be a success. We needed a solution. This was it. So a component library is not a product. It is not something that you can ever sit on and be like, hey, I've done it. Here you go. It is a process that involves all the people who are going to use it in your organization. And you have to continuously look at what you're doing, what works, what doesn't work. Iterate. Iterate on it like you would iterate on a piece of software where you can see the versions. I can see the versions of the process on this project, and I'm proud of the work that we've done. It's basically like being the community manager of an internal open source library. You have a lot of the same demands. It's in the same way, it's kind of like being middle management. You're going to get shot upon by all sides. To quote young Jack Reed, it's not a bad project, but it's not a fun project. Bless him. He's done really great work. And also another great quote from him, because I'm going to keep quoting him, 99% of this is people. This is literally one of the most, this is one of the pillars of our front-end architecture, and it is in no way a technical problem. It is in almost every way a human problem. So what is next for BuzzBlocks? Like I said, we cannot rest on our laurels, not even for a single second. Well, this is the future of BuzzBlocks. This is Emily. She is a designer at BuzzFeed. She's really great. I think she just got back from her honeymoon. Yay, Emily. And so Emily is actually a designer on the front-end infrastructure team because we view design as one of the products that is provided to our developers at BuzzFeed. And so we want to bring BuzzBlocks from being what it currently is, a solution to an engineering problem, to become a true design system. Now, if you're looking at these slides, I think it should be very clear to you that I'm not a designer. And I will leave the definition of what a design system should be to other people and other talks. But what we believe is that when design truly owns BuzzBlocks, when designers are coding their own BuzzBlocks, which but designers at BuzzFeed are fully capable of doing, they're HTML and CSS wizards. And like the developer only comes in at the point of adding JavaScript, then we will know that we have done our job. And it's a little bit out of our hands, which would be great. Engineer yourself into obsolescence, guys. It's the only way. So system first is not the most intuitive way for designers faced with constantly changing business requirements to work. But we are going to change that for them. And with empathy, with care for our users, I think that it's possible. You're a translator. that's between humans and computers. That's your job as a developer. In the context of a component library, you're a translator between the needs of your designers and your front-end developers and the needs of the business. You synthesize those into an NPM package or however else you want to package it. A small thing that crystallizes a lot of people's thoughts and ideas. So every technical problem, I really think, becomes a human problem at scale. BuzzFeed has scale, and we also have human empathy, which is part of what makes it such a fun place to work and such a fun set of projects to work on. Thank you. I'd also like to particularly thank, though, the conference organizers, the audiovisual people, all the events and facilities people, and everyone who's worked on making this conference such an amazing thing. Thank you.